Hello everyone and welcome to video tutorial 23. You should now know all about plant transport and you should be able to pause the video and answer the question. So try to do this before I go over the answer. So it says the diagram represents a section through a leaf and you need to try to work out what tissue W is. You've got your leaf vein labelled. And then it says name tissue W and then it says the cells in tissue W have a greater number of chloroplasts than other leaf cells. Suggest the advantage of these cells being located near the upper surface of the leaf. So tissue W would be the palisade mesophyll layer, and the advantage of these cells being located near the upper surface of the leaf is that they are near the top, so this allows the cells to absorb more sunlight. So well done if you managed to get that correct. If you didn't, you need to go watch video tutorial 22 again until you understand it. So let's go to the next part of the course, which is animal transport. So today we're going to be looking at animal transport, which makes up key area 6. If you want the worksheets to go with the video, remember to pause the video and go to 2 multicellular, 6 transport systems and animals, 2 consumables and activities. The PowerPoints are found in 1 point PowerPoint, and this PowerPoint is called 6.1 blood. Our next learning intention is to be able to state the 3 substances that make up blood, name the materials which are transported in the blood, give the function of the red blood cells, including the role of hemoglobin, describe how the structure of red blood cells is related to its function, and give the function and describe the structure of white blood cells. To be successful, you will need to be able to list the 3 substances that make blood and what they transport in the blood. Write the function of red blood cells, including the role of hemoglobin. Write how the structure of red blood cells are related to its function. And then write the function and describe the structure of white blood cells. And then finally, compare the 2 types of white blood cells. How do we transport useful gases like oxygen, nutrients, and hormones around our body? Pause the video and write down what you think. The answer is the circulatory system. So, an average adult has 5 litres of blood in their body, and the circulatory system carries blood to all parts of the body. Nutrients, oxygen, carbon dioxide, and hormones are all transported in the blood. So everything that we need is transported in our blood. What is our blood made up of then? So in mammals, the blood contains plasma, red blood cells, and white blood cells. It transports nutrients, oxygen, and carbon dioxide. We should have already come across red blood cells in cell structure and function. So red blood cells are involved in the transport of oxygen, and you should already know that that's the function of a red blood cell. So if you don't learn that red blood cells are involved in the transport of oxygen. Red blood cells are specialized, they have a specialized shape, and they are bioconcave in shape, and they have no nucleus, which gives them the greatest possible surface area for picking up oxygen, and they also contain hemoglobin. These features allow them to transport oxygen efficiently in the form of oxyhemoglobin. So there is their shape at the bottom. They are bioconcave and they have no nucleus, which allows more oxygen to be transported. What exactly is this hemoglobin word that we just said? So red blood cells contain a protein called hemoglobin. This allows red blood cells to transport oxygen. So as the blood passes through the lungs and capillaries, hemoglobin combines with oxygen to form oxyhemoglobin. When the blood reaches the respiring cells, oxyhemoglobin dissociates and oxygen diffuses into the cells. So you need to know what hemoglobin is and how oxygen is added to it or taken away. So in the lungs, you've got your hemoglobin and oxygen combining to form oxyhemoglobin, whereas at tissues, you've got your oxygen coming off of your hemoglobin, so it can then go from the capillary where it is to into the tissue, so that your tissue can then perform your respiration. And then here's a diagram, so oxygen being released from hemoglobin or oxygen binding to hemoglobin. So here it would be oxyhemoglobin and there it would just be hemoglobin. So make sure you know and understand that before we go on. Now you should be able to pause the video and write down the function of the red blood cell and explain how it's specialised to carry out its function before I go over the answers. You need to make sure you know the function and the specialisation of a red blood cell. The answer is the function of a red blood cell is to transport oxygen, and its specialized structure is it has a large surface area because it contains no nucleus, and it has hemoglobin to maximize the volume of oxygen it can carry around the body. Well done if you managed to get that correct. If you didn't, then you need to watch about the red blood cell again. Pathogens are disease-causing microorganisms, which include bacteria, viruses, and fungi. So what happens when they get into our body and try to make us ill? So there are white blood cells in our blood, and the white blood cells are part of the immune system, which are involved in destroying these pathogens. And there are two main types of white blood cell, which are your phagocytes and your lymphocytes. You need to know the structure and function of both your phagocytes and your lymphocytes. So let's look at phagocytes in more detail first. So phagocytes carry out phagocytosis, which is where the phagocyte engulfs and digests the pathogen. So as you can see in this diagram, the white blood cell phagocyte wraps round the pathogen, it engulfs it, and it digests it with enzymes. Make sure you do not say eat, it's always got to be engulf and digest. You will lose your mark if you say eat. So phagocytes carry out phagocytosis, which is where they engulf and digest pathogens. The other white blood cell that you need to know about is a lymphocyte. So lymphocytes produce antibodies, which are Y-shaped proteins, which destroy pathogens. So each antibody is specific to a particular pathogen. So here is your lymphocyte down here, and it produces these antibodies, which are all specific to particular pathogens. So what does it mean by antibodies are specific? So each antibody has a complementary shape to only one pathogen. Now you should have heard the word complementary shape when we talked about hormones, also when we talked about enzymes, and when we talked about DNA. So if you get asked how are antibodies specific, your answer needs to be that each antibody has a complementary shape to only one pathogen. Now you can complete an activity where you fill out a white blood cell concept cartoon comparing phagocytes and lymphocytes so that you know the structure and differences between each of them. You can find this in activities and consumables. So it is called 2-point storyboard and the consumables. You should now be able to pause the video and try to complete the table with the correct answers before I go over it. So the answers would be oxygen is releases energy from food and it's carried from the lungs to the body cells. Carbon dioxide is role in the body as its waste products from respiration and it's carried from body cells to the lungs. And then we've got your urea, which is a waste product from protein and it's carried from your liver to your kidneys. And your glucose, which is required for energy, is carried from the small intestine to body cells. So well done if you managed to get that correct. If not, make sure you know this table. So let's try to answer some of the SQA past paper questions. So the first question says, name the pigment in red blood cells that transport oxygen. So pause the video and try to answer the question. So it should be hemoglobin is the pigment in red blood cells that carries oxygen. So well done if you got that correct. If not, you'll need to watch the video again. The second question says, hemoglobin is found in red blood cells, state its function. So pause the video and try to answer the question before I go over the answer. So the answer would be that it carries oxygen. So the role of hemoglobin is to carry oxygen. So well done if you got that correct. If not, then go back and watch the start of the video again. This just shows where the SQA questions were taken from. So now we're going to do a true and false quiz. So the first question is, white blood cells are part of the immune system. Do you think that's true or false? The answer is that it is true. The next question is, red blood cells contain hemoglobin, which carries oxygen around the body. Do you think that's true or false? The answer is true. The next question is, plasma is the part of the blood that makes it red. Is that true or false? The answer is false. It would be the clear part. And for lymphocytes and phagocytes are both types of white blood cell. Is that true or false? The answer is true. And then lymphocytes produce antibodies to destroy pathogens. Is that true or false? The answer is true. And 6 phagocytes eat pathogens. So is that true or false? The answer is false. Remember, they never eat pathogens, they digest and engulf pathogens. So never eat. always engulf and digest. So the next question is a problem solving question. So it says produce a graph using the data in the table. There will be 2 lines on your graph, so you will need to color code them, so you'll need to have a key. So you've got your time in days, your antibody concentration milliliters per unit, and your after first exposure to antigen and after second exposure to antigen. So try and pause the video and try to plot your graph before I go over the answer. So the answer would be that you would have to label your axes. So you've got your time in days on the bottom, and you've got your antibody concentration. So remember, whatever you control, you put on the bottom, whatever you're measuring, you put on the y-axis, going up and down the way. Then you would need to make an even scale. So for the first, the x-axis went up in 2s, and for the y-axis it went up in 10s. So any scale that's even, you remember you would do your points. Then I have plotted the after first exposure first, which are the red dots, and I've made a key, and then I've linked them all together with the lines, and then I've plotted the after second exposure and made that a square. So that is what you do if you ever get a double graph. So well done if you managed to get that correct. If not, you can come get help from a teacher. So let's pause the video and see if you can answer these problem solving questions. So looking at your graph, what is the difference between your first response to antigen and your second? And then the second question is, why do you think this happened? So pause it, try to come up with the answer before I go over the answers. So the answer would be that antibody production is faster after the second injection, which you would just take from the information in your graph. And why do you think this happens? Well, you should know from second year that lymphocytes keep memory of the disease pathogen. So if you are ever exposed to the disease pathogen again, the dormant memory cells recognize it straight away and rapidly start multiplying. Because the plasma cells have already been trained to produce antibodies against the organism, they are able to produce a large number of antibodies very quickly within hours to fight the disease. And this is the principles of how vaccines work. Well done if you managed to get that all correct. Now you can complete the activities below to review your learning. So you can do the blood past paper questions in the key area questions and answers, and you can do the multicellular exam practice questions on page 43 and 44. So to be successful, you should now be able to write 3 substances that make blood and what they transport in the blood. Write the function of red blood cells, including the role of hemoglobin. Write how the structure of red blood cells is related to its function. Write the function and describe the structure of white blood cells and compare the 2 types of white blood cells. So that is the end of this video tutorial. So well done if you can confidently answer all of the success criteria. If not, then you'll need to watch the video again. So that is the end. Woohoo!